Formula 1 is a very political sport, and there is one driver who's playing the part of a slick, dirty politician all too well. That driver is George Russell. He happens to drive for the most diplomatic team with a team principal who's pretty much the policy maker in F1. Still, that doesn't excuse Russell from telling outright lies about Max Verstappen. So what did he say and why was it a lie? I'm Wimbo. Here's 3 seconds to leave a like. The current situation in F1 is that after 3 races into the highly anticipated Formula 1 season with a brand new set of regulations, the rule makers have been discussing major changes already because it's a big old mess. Drivers aren't happy because of the 50-50 split in battery and combustion engine power. They can't make a difference anymore, as pushing too hard in the corners will be punished later in the lap when the battery is empty. Fans aren't happy because the rules are very complicated to follow. Things on track aren't very clear. And despite of getting a bunch of overtakes in races, those drive-bys feel artificial and have no value. Then there's the danger of huge accidents due to the difference in speed because some cars are boosting and other cars are recharging. It's very clear that all this stuff needs to be sorted, and that's why this month, April, the drivers have had a meeting with the FIA to discuss these matters. And from what I've read, the outcomes have been positive. This week, the teams and manufacturers will discuss things further, but it's expected that some changes will happen straight away, and some changes will be made for next season. Hopefully, this will be enough to convince Max Verstappen to stay in the sport, as he's been the most vocal about the regulations, and he let the world know he might walk away if the racing stays as poor as it is now. George Russell, who has had quite a few issues with Max Verstappen in the past seasons, has talked about his Dutch rival. The stuff he came out with is quite the opposite of what Max said, which was to be expected. But at the same time, they are such obvious lies that I had to make this video to address it. I'm puzzled about how confidently he said the things he said and how he expects to get away with it. Then again, he might just be preaching to his own choir here, and those people take everything he says as gospel because they want to believe it. This is how a lot of politicians work. So let's delve into what the number 2 in the F1 standings had to say. In an interview with Sky Sports F1, George Russell talked about how you don't want to lose Max Verstappen, but it comes part and parcel with Formula 1. He spoke about how he didn't like the regulations in 2022 when it was porpoising and killing everyone's backs. That the cars were big and heavy, but Max Verstappen wasn't complaining because he was winning. He said the 4-time world champion's complaints right now about the 2026 regulations aren't the same as the ones from McLaren, Ferrari and Mercedes because they are on the front end of the grid. He said it was understandable in his situation, and he spoke about how Verstappen achieved everything he wanted in the sport, and there's not much more for him to achieve in Formula 1 other than going after the records. I think he means beating the 7 titles Michael Schumacher has. Russell reckons that because he knows Verstappen and other drivers who have achieved a lot, he should do what puts a smile on his face. The overall feeling I get is that Russell really loves the idea of Max Verstappen calling it a day, because he's afraid of him becoming competitive again and stopping him from winning his title. That's my overall feeling. I think it's cheeky to talk about other drivers' retirements. I'm sure that he wouldn't dare to say the same about his former teammate Lewis Hamilton's retirement. Now, I can hear you say Hamilton doesn't talk about retirement when it goes badly. Well, actually, he did say Ferrari needed to get a better driver and that he was useless in Hungary last season. Now, reacting to this wouldn't have a political benefit, so he stayed quiet about that. There's a huge benefit for him if he's finally rid of that pesky guy who always calls him out on his two-faced bullshit, on track and off track. The funny thing is that Verstappen isn't a threat on track, but he has his hands full with the driver who was a rookie last season. Kimi Andrea Antonelli is leading the standings after he won 2 races against Russell 1. Anyway, the whole sentiment of Russell wanting Verstappen to leave of his own accord is something I get. He shouldn't talk about it, but maybe it was a question from Sky. I only have the clip with the answer. What I don't take kindly on is the outright lying he did about Verstappen not complaining about the ground effect regulations. I'm going to show you how untrue that statement was. Max Verstappen has always been honest and straightforward about pretty much anything in F1. No politics, no bullshit, just straight answers, looking people in the eye. In 2022 we had a new set of regulations that focused on the floor mostly, with the goal of getting rid of dirty air, so the cars could follow and overtake more easily. Adrian Newey and his team built a car with a good solid balance, and they were one of the few teams that didn't have many problems with porpoising. The phenomenon known as porpoising was that these cars had downforce through suction from the floor to the track. But if the ride height was too low, it would suck towards the track more, hit the track, and then that process would repeat itself rapidly. These cars were stiff on the suspension, so the drivers would get rattled all over the place, and it was a horrible experience. Russell was right in saying that the W13 Mercedes 2022 car had this problem, and he obviously didn't like this experience. Funny thing to note is that Lewis Hamilton, George Russell and Toto Wolff did so much lobbying and moaning to the FIA that they stepped in and forced a technical directive. Every team had to increase the ride height so the vertical oscillations would stop. Now think about this. A team builds a car, it has a problem that can be fixed by making the distance between the floor and the track a little higher, but still the Mercedes clan pushed for a TD because they didn't want to lose performance, while other teams didn't. Remember this. Max Verstappen didn't complain about porpoising, that's true, not because he was winning, but because they didn't have it in the RB18 and the cars that followed. What did he complain about then? Here's what he said. The bouncing is very uncomfortable for the drivers, and after a while it can cause damage to the car. It is like you are compressed, especially in your back and your neck. That is not a pleasant feeling, especially when it gets very aggressive. Of course you can drive a race like that, but you will not feel well when you get out of the car. So there you go. Verstappen won between 8 and 18 races every season in the 4 seasons with ground effect. But he wasn't holding back about the downsides of them. On the Talking Bull podcast on the Oracle Red Bull Racing YouTube channel, he said this: the stiffness of the cars. You had to run them, of course, very low to the ground. And for our backs and everything, it was quite tough. Cornering was 5.5 G on average. But in some tracks, because it was a bit bumpy or whatever, and then the cars being so low to the ground, you bottom out so aggressively that, for example in Austin, I would hit like 9G vertical load. So that is really not nice for your spine and your neck. Everything was always like blocked, and we trained for it, and I know it's part of racing, but that for me is a little bit too extreme. I don't know what that is, if this isn't a big complaint about the ground effect cars. He also said that stiff cars and the size of them took the magic of racing away, and that he preferred the 2020 or the 2021 cars. But the ground effect cars are still F1 cars. That's an important thing to note as well, that these cars could be pushed to the limit and drivers who put their balls on the line could get the most out of it. Which is the opposite now, because now they need to be careful and strategic. The speeds and turns are so low that Alonso's chef could drive the car. Max Verstappen is complaining about the problems these regulations have that can't be solved by increasing the ride height. They have a fundamental flaw. They need to be addressed for every team, unlike the porpoising problem, to make the sport better again. To me, that's a big difference. Max Verstappen may also be pushing things for political reasons, but there are issues that seriously ruin the sport, and not just for one team. Now that we have established Russell is lying about Verstappen, we can continue to see what will happen next. It has been said that from Miami onwards we'll have a completely new championship again. Major upgrades will be brought, the FIA will implement fixes to the battery problems, and there will be a list of teams who are allowed to upgrade their engines with the A-Duo system. I, as a Max fanboy, hope that Red Bull will fix the RB22 and Max Verstappen can fight for the top positions again. Ferrari is already keeping up with Mercedes despite having a slower engine. So if they can increase their power, they will start winning races too. Well, Charles Leclerc, most likely. McLaren has already shown in Japan that they can compete with Mercedes, so they could make things interesting too. George Russell had a golden opportunity to win 3 races in the fastest car, but failed. He had issues, I saw that, but somehow I think a better driver would have beaten Antonelli despite Russell's misfortune. That's what being a champion is all about. Winning the race while overcoming issues. Russell seems to be a lot less comfortable with his chances than after testing, and perhaps that's why he yaps about Max Verstappen so much. It's to hide his own insecurity. The fight he should be having is one inside the Mercedes team. He would do well to put a stop to Antonelli's momentum and confidence. I know drivers like Verstappen, Alonso and Hamilton would nip the Kimi situation in the bud as quickly as possible instead of talking about the guy in P9. He should focus on what is at hand for him, because the way things are going now, he and his team might slow down the changes for the 2026 season, but he still might get beaten by the Italian teammate. What do you think? Subscribe. Take care now. Doei doei.